future starts now. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered his New Year address on Sunday, vowing to press ahead with reforms in 2018.
2018年是全面贯彻中共10大精神的开局之年。
2018 is the start of the comprehensive implementation of the spirits of the 19th CPC National Congress. The Congress drew up the beautiful blueprint of our development for the next 3 decades.
With an increasing important role on the world stage, China will make contributions to world peace and development.
中国坚定维护联合国权威和地位。
China will staunchly safeguard the authority and status of the UN and actively fulfill its due responsibility and duty in international affairs. China will honor its promises in countering global climate change and actively push forward the common construction of the Belt and Road. China will act as a builder of world peace and a contributor to global development and an upholder of the international order.
A little different from other warm New Year's greetings, DPRK leader Kim Jong-un's bold words once again put the spotlight on Pyongyang's nuclear threats and soaring tensions on the Korean Peninsula.
This year, we should focus on mass-producing nuclear warheads and ballistic missiles for operational deployment. At the same time, the strategic system has been established.
Through 2017, the DPRK launched 17 missiles, each one more powerful than the last. On November 29th, the launch of the Hwasong-15 intercontinental ballistic missile was a breakthrough for Pyongyang that put the entire U.S. mainland within range, and U.S. patience is fading fast.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
From the possibility of peace to more nuclear activity still leaves a big question mark on what the future holds for the Korean Peninsula in 2018.
So the New Year's speech coming from the Chinese president, he talked about both sides, both international relations for China and also his domestic agenda. What does that mean for the rest of the world? Let's join our panelist, Wang Yiwei, director of the Institute of International Affairs at Renmin University, joining us for this edition of our program. Welcome, sir. Also, we'd like to welcome Alexander Lukin, professor and director of the East Asian and SCO Studies Center at the Moscow State Institute of International Relations. Welcome to Beijing.
Thank you very much.
And joining us in London, in the UK, we invited John Ross, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. I want to welcome the three of you, gentlemen. Happy New Year. And that should start from you, Professor Wang, here in Beijing. About China's role internationally. President Xi Jinping talked about holding high, is a supporter of the UN system, is actually going to implement very well the commitment to the climate change by the Paris Accord, and it's going to continue with its Belt and Road initiative. Anything new here? What kind of message should we get?
Well, China definitely is one of the major supporters of the United Nations system, a multilateral system. Given that some countries like the United States withdraw some Paris Accord, and also the more and more focus on the American first, and then unilaterally. So I think that's very unique for the United Nations system, and also for the United Nations peace and development. China sent more peacekeepers in P5 and also contribute a lot to the world development. Since the opening of the global financial crisis, Chinese economic growth contribute to 1/3 of all the economic growth. So this definitely.
So this is going to be a continuity in a way in terms of China's role.
Next year, China will contribute more and more, like host of the SCO summit, and also we have the Shanghai International Import Expo.
Right. So what does that mean, Professor Lukin? China is said it's going to be an ardent supporter of the UN system, while the United States seems to withdraw already from UNESCO, and also its budget and commitment to the other UN systems and agendas have been reducing. What does it say Are we going to see some competitions or very different interpretation about the world?
Well, I think at the moment China is one of the strongest supporters in the world of the UN system, and this is very clear because it's good for China. It's in its interests. China, well, in the United Nations, for example, in the Security Council, the majority, well, among the permanent members, let's say, of the Security Council, the majority of the Western countries, and the United States is the strongest country there. But China, like Russia, they have the right to stop any decision there, and that's why it's in their interest to maintain this system. From that point of view, it's the United States, which is the revolutionary force in the current international affairs system. And China is a stabilizing force, I would say.
Stabilizing force. Will China really play that role? For example, about the issue of the DPRK, Korean Peninsula nuclear issue today, Professor Wang, we heard New Year speeches coming from different sides. One is coming from the DPRK, suggesting to the United States that the nuclear weapon button is on the table of the President Kim. However, he also delivered a conciliatory message to his South Korean counterpart, saying that North Korea is thinking of sending a delegation to the Winter Olympic Games coming February, and it is going to be a great opportunity to showcase so-called Korean status to the world. How do you read these mixed messages? What role will China play in that regard?
Firstly, I think the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-il, want to say that the nuclear deterrence use. So they want to, they not want to use this. The U.S. as a threat, U.S. ROK alliance as a threat. Then secondly, he want to negotiate, I think, resume to, maybe to the negotiating table by sending the delegation to to the South Korean Olympic Games. I think that's a very good signal to, for the South and North relations.
I'm not sure whether they're really sending a delegation for negotiations, but they're sending a delegation at least for the Winter Olympic Games. We do not know whether that is likely to happen. Having said that, though, Mr. Lukin, the U.S. President was being asked by journalists about his reactions to the North Korean President's remarks. He said, "We'll see," quote, end of quote. How do you, as a scholar from Russia, who has been quite intensively looking at the situation over the decades, see this remark and also the role of China and Russia, possibly?
Well, China and Russia both do not want nuclear Korean Peninsula, and they do everything they can to avoid this.
How do you interpret President Trump's remarks saying, "We'll see"?
Well, the position of the United States is strange from all points of view, to say the least. Because President Trump, since he came to power, he says that he was going to attack or to do something very decisive against North Korea, but he actually cannot do it. Everyone knows that he cannot deliver a strike against North Korea because the cost will be too high. So it's not really clear to me why one should obviously bluff in foreign policy. I mean, you can bluff in foreign policy, but if the bluff is so obvious, why do you do that? I think this kind of diminishes the influence of the United States, of the word of the United States in the world. But that's, of course, for him to decide.
People are looking at two issues, China and the United States, and also for the international agenda. One is the DPRK nuclear issue for this year, 2018, because very likely the DPRK is going to reach some stage when it comes with development of the weaponry system, Mr. Ross. And also, it is the trade issue as well. People are expecting maybe some conflict already at the very beginning of the year. So what do you think about the role that China is playing, Mr. Ross, and also the Chinese president's remarks for his New Year address?
Well, I thought that President Xi's remarks were very well judged. I mean, The reality of the situation is that China is the most important locomotive of the world economy, and has been in particular since the international financial crisis in 2008. The projects in which it's involved, not merely China, but for One Belt, One Road, and also incidentally in the South China Sea with Indonesia and some other countries, account for a far greater proportion of world economic growth than does the United States. But on the other hand, China gains from this cooperation. So the idea which President Xi put forward of a common future for humanity it's not merely nice and warm words, but it corresponds to the interest both of China and the other countries. Whereas what is put as America first, which seems to be America alone, is not in the interest of the rest of the world. It's not in the interest of the United States people either. I mean, if there's going to be a trade war with China, well, the price of products for the American people are going to go up considerably because they're going to be blocking the prices of very competitive imports which come in from China. That's why, incidentally, there's considerable opposition inside the United States to serious sanctions against it. So President Xi is putting forward what might be called win-win, and President Trump, unfortunately, on trade, seems to be playing with, although he hasn't actually done yet, he's talking about, we'll have to judge actions. Some people are putting forward a lose-lose.
But the thing is, how can China bring others with China to develop further and look into the situation of 2018? Belt and Road Initiative is something, Professor Wang, you've been studying a lot. So will China have the money, the energy, the power, and the capacity of bringing everybody else with it along the road of Belt and Road Initiative, let's just say?
Well, it's China not to. China should just have this initiative, not China do by himself, because the infrastructure building for the in Asia and for the world is cost billions of the even trillions of the U.S. dollars. So I think the international financial system, financial market can provide some like the hot money. They also have trillions of U.S. dollars. So how can the hot money to the cold money focus on the infrastructure building, real economy? That's a challenge for China because RMB in the capital level is not inconvertible, not yet. So I think the West participant in the Belt and Road Initiative is very important.
Will 2018 really make a key difference when it comes to China's effort of pushing forward the Belt and Road Initiative and let everybody else to work with it? I mean, the idea, Mr. Lukin, Russia has this Eurasian corridor initiative as well. So how countries, whether part of the Eurasian corridor already, react to all of this?
Well, not only Russia, but Eurasian Economic Union, of which Russia is a member. It's a union of five countries of post-Soviet space, let's say. We signed an agreement with China on cooperation or linkage with Belt and Road Initiative, so we cooperate very well on that and fully support Chinese initiative. You know that President Putin came here. Actually, President Xi mentioned that among the greatest events of this year was that meeting of Belt and Road Summit. And President Putin came to that summit and delivered a speech there. So this is a sign of full support of this initiative, and we are going to work, I'm sure, in Russia to cooperate with China, because we also need Chinese investment, Chinese cooperation to build our infrastructure in Russia. That's very important for us.
All right. It's not just the international agenda, but also domestically, how is it going to work in the year 2018? It's been 4 decades, in fact, to the year since China opened to the rest of the world and relentlessly pursued the reform. Chinese President Xi Jinping minced no words in emphasizing just how important these two are in shaping the nation's future.
2018年我们将迎来改革开放40周年。
2018 marks the 40th anniversary of China's reform and opening up policy. The policy is the only way for modern China to make progress in its development as well as to realize the Chinese dream. With the 40th anniversary of the reform and opening up policy as a turning point, we shall cut paths through mountains and build bridges across rivers, overcome all difficulties and carry reform through to the end.
So you can see the Chinese president talking about reform and opening up. Some have been wondering, when China's economy already reached this stage, when China is having a very grand international strategy, will China's reform and opening up still continue? I think Chinese president did answer that question very well this time in the New Year's speech. And he talked about the challenges of reform and opening up. And he said that's exactly what we need to do. Professor Wang, the speed of reform and opening up, some say, today cannot be compared to when they just began. And people wonder, will this speed be able to solve the challenge that are facing us?
We say this is the new era. The open reform enter the new era. That means the first era is the more integrated with the international community. China joined WTO, joined many international organizations. And now the open reform is I think to adapt to the new reality, new dynamic of the world. So it's a mutual adaptation between China and the world. So it's not just a one-dimensional China integrated with the world. Open reform is want to increase China's comparative advantage. So it's for every country, I think, they also need open reform.
Professor Ross, your thought? Opening up and reform. China's been doing that for 4 decades. New era. What is the next important stage?
Well, the most crucial thing is that China is making a transition from what it calls moderate prosperity, but I'll use international criteria. That is the World Bank's definition of a high-income economy, which China will hit in about 2021, 2022 at the present growth rate. This is a total transformation of the situation in the world. Only 16.5% of the world's population lives in high-income economies at the present time, and China by itself is more than 18% of the world's population. So China achieving this status is going to more than double the number of people in the world living in high-income economies. And all the things that flow from that are the things which President Xi was addressing. That is, the demands of the people and the needs and the possibilities of the Chinese people are going to enormously increase. One of the greatest tasks that was set by the reform and opening up was to get hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. Well, that job still remains to be completely finished by 2020. We're still looking at around 30 million people who have got to be taken out of poverty. But fundamentally, the problem of conquering extreme poverty has been dealt with. Now people are looking at vastly greater social needs, cultural needs, entertainment needs, foreign travel, all the things that go with our high-income economies that are highly desirable. This is a very complex situation for China to navigate through, as President Xi has stressed, and that's what the 19th Congress addressed. But it's going to be a total transformation of the world. Right. Can you imagine this? The number of people in the world in high-income economies will more than double when China achieves that status. This is an extraordinary global fact.
It is going to be an extraordinary moment, but of course, come with it will also be needs for changes to the international system as well. We want to thank the 3 of you, gentlemen, for being with us on the very first day of 2018. Happy New Year to you once again. Wang Yiwei, Alexander Lukin, John Ross. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us.